And thanks so much for making it a priority to be here. We're recording the meeting, as you probably saw. So if you need to come back and watch any of it later, that's totally fine. I know you guys are busy. Some of you are like work at the front desk of your school, so you definitely are very busy. But okay, great. And I love everyone saying good morning from whatever. So if you want to, you can go ahead and throw a hello in there and tell us where you're from. And I'll take a minute to just kind of introduce myself and the team. I know a lot of you because of previous trainings, and also because I have historically, the last year I was responsible for the privacy compliance review. So it's really fun to see all these names that we, email a lot with, and some of you we've spoken with in person. So I'm Katie Chalice. I am the new director of privacy. I replaced David Soleil, who was truly like irreplaceable. So I guess replace him is not the right word, but and then Whitney was in that position before, Whitney Phillips. So this is a new position for me as of, I think, November. It's probably when I started. And John is here with us too. He's always been doing work with SDPC, but he's now also doing the work that I used to do with the annual privacy compliance review. So really excited about the work he's been doing there. And he's going to talk to us about some of the results of the compliance review a little bit later. We have a position open, as you may know, if you follow our newsletter. And I'll just tell you guys, we had 269 applicants. It was incredible and like shocking. So we were really flattered that people would even want to work on our team, and also just really, I know it's cliche, but just really overwhelmed by the response and really thrilled. So we haven't hired anyone yet, but we're kind of working through that process. Melissa's also here with us. I don't know if most of you have met Melissa. Well, actually, were you here for the spring training last year, Melissa?
Maybe I joined it, but I don't think I was a team member at that point.
Okay,
of this
awesome.
team.
So everyone wave at Melissa, virtually or otherwise. She is amazing and has been a great addition to our team. Unlike John's position, Melissa is focused mostly, some external focus with LEAs, but she's mostly focused on doing data governance work internally at USBE, and she's done amazing work there. And she's just a lovely human being. So I'm excited for you guys to all get to know her over time. Oh yeah, and some of you might know Melissa from her time in assessment. She was also worked in assessment for I think 3 years. So it was a great resource to people there. Nicole Clark, I don't believe most of you have met her either. She started on our team in November. Is that right, Nicole? And she is also amazing. I know I'm like overusing that phrase, but I love the people I work with. Nicole has been awesome. She also works with the data and statistics team. So for those of you guys who know Aaron Bruff and his team at USBE, she also supports them and does fantastic work. And one thing we love about Nicole is that she is a parent. So John is also a parent, and it's always fun to have a parent's perspective on data privacy. So we've enjoyed that. All right, so let's see. Let's dive into our agenda. Oh, I keep trying to click. John, can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. And before I forget, I just want to mention some kind of like housekeeping things. So the chat is awesome, as you know, for those of you who attend virtual meetings on a regular basis, and we encourage you to utilize the chat. So what's going to happen is Melissa is going to be monitoring the chat. And so if you have questions throughout any of our sessions, you can throw them in there. She'll make a judgment call either to just like kind of like interrupt us and be like, oh, excuse me, Katie, we have a question. Or she might hold on to them later. We could talk about them at the end, but she's actively monitoring that. And she'll also be like dropping links and stuff in the chat. And other housekeeping stuff, I think that's it, probably. let's see. So our agenda today, we're going to start with a new segment called All the Small Things, which is kind of a shout out to Blink 182, right? Do we have any other millennials on the call? I tried to find a public domain photo of Blink 182 and there is none. So we're going to run through a few things there. We've also got a guest here today with us, Kara. She's going to be talking to us about a bill that passed last year and has privacy implications. And John's going to give us an overview of the review that he did of the privacy compliance stuff that you guys submitted in the fall. I'm going to be talking to you about Utah PPRA, and then we'll kind of say goodbye and ask you guys to fill out a survey at the end. So again, if you have any questions and or comments, go ahead and throw them in the chat. And Melissa, please feel free to just interrupt if you have anything you want to address with the group. Okay, I'm getting ready to share my screen. Sometimes I feel like such an oldie. Okay. All right, so we have 12 small things that we're going to talk about today. And I would like to just mention that we are interested in your feedback on like these are all things that could potentially just be addressed in an email or in a newsletter. So at the end of the survey or at the end of the session, we're going to give you a survey, and I want your honest feedback on like, was this even helpful to talk about it, or would it have been better if we just sent it to you in an email? So kind of keep that in your mind as we're going through this. The first thing that I want to talk to you guys about is that we're chunking this into 3 sections. So we've got our data privacy agreements. I'm going to give you a heads up on some of those. We've got legislative updates that we want to give you a heads up on, and some other stuff as well. So starting with data privacy agreements, this is just kind of a refresher. Some of you might know this, but we try to kind of speak to the audience, knowing that some people are new data managers and some people are veterans. So if I'm telling you something you already know, don't try not to feel insulted. We're just wanting to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So data privacy agreements, we usually call them DPAs for short. These are like sort of side contracts that LEAs enter into in addition to like a traditional contract with a vendor. And you almost always, in almost all cases, if you're going to be sharing student data with a third party, you'll almost always need to have a data privacy agreement in place. The only exception to that would be if the current contract of the vendor already contains the provisions required. So, or the other cases when it's a state contract. So we at the state have already kind of included those privacy provisions in our contract. So DPA is a word you'll hear a lot throughout this training. Data privacy agreement. And for those of you who are not familiar, we also have a really powerful tool available to all of you for free, which is called the Student Data Privacy Consortium. So it's a consortium, meaning it's like a group of people kind of, going together for a common cause, but it also acts as like a tool to allow you to enter into data privacy agreements in a more standardized and efficient way. So, let's see, I just saw a question from Angela. Is there a place where LEAs can get the actual contracts that are held by the state? Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something that I've been working on in my time in this position. There's some level of confidentiality that's required of state contracts initially, like before they're signed. I'm wanting to work with some folks here at USBE to see if that confidentiality requirement remains past the time that it's signed, because I do think it would be really good for you guys as LEAs to be able to actually see the contracts that we have in place. I'm speaking for USBE right there. For as far as like UETN, the contracts that they enter into, historically, they've liked to keep those like internal. So I don't know about those, but where USBE enters into contracts, I'm hopeful that we can get those into your hands. But I just need to, yeah, Robert says, file a grandma request. I imagine that should be a non-issue. All right, so Again, SCPC is a tool where you can go to originate, meaning sign up for a data privacy agreement for the first time, or you can do what we call like piggybacking off of an existing agreement. So if another district or charter school in the state has entered into a data privacy agreement with a vendor, SDPC has a feature that allows you to go in and sort of say, hey, me too, like I also want to enter into this same agreement with the vendor. That's pretty slick. Okay, so in this section, we're going to be going through, I think, 4 products that we want to make you aware of from the DPA, the data privacy agreement perspective. Okay, the first one is Kids Read Now. So this contract passed, I think, in maybe 2 months ago, maybe a month ago. And this is a program that was kind of required by legislation. And the program sends books home to kids, and specifically they're aiming, I believe, to do this over the summer to try to prevent the slide that sometimes happen in the summer with students kind of like losing some of their literacy skills. This only applies to schools that are Title I schools or schools that are participating in the Partnerships for Student Success Grant program. So that's not all of you, but it is many of you. And if that's the case, if you are one of those schools, then we wanted to give you a heads up on a few things. Also, I'll just mention that all of these action items that you're going to see on the following slides, all of them are contained in our closing doc that we'll give you at the end. So you don't need to write things down necessarily. We'll also give you access to this slideshow, so you can come back and revisit it if you want to. So if you, oh, yes.
There is just a question, I believe, about Kids Read Now from Angela. Have they actually executed the contract? KRN is already requesting student data uploads, and I have a call in with them about the DPA and or contract.
Oh, yes. Okay, so there's kind of 2 parts to this contract. One was the USBE part, because we are the ones that are paying for it. But they also, Kids Read Now or KRN, they also need to obtain a DPA with you, and they have originated that. I can't remember, was that with Troy, that Troy did that? John, you might remember Troy Lunt and
Iron County did that. We did that about 2
Okay, yeah,
weeks.
so someone already originated it. So if you go into SDPC, and we assisted with that process, so we feel good about the language and stuff that's in there. So you can just go piggyback off of that one when you're ready. And then it's really important, it was really important to the board to make sure that you guys at the LEA level are notifying parents of what's involved if they participate. So the board was really interested in making sure that there, and I think we actually have a board member on the call with us. I think member Klein is here with us. So it was really important to the board that parents are notified not only of the fact that they're going to be receiving books, but also that if they participate, certain data will be shared with the vendor. And so the guidance for LEAs for you guys is to notify parents of what's involved in this, and then also give them instructions on how to opt out if they don't want their data shared, or if they want to opt out for any other reason, like they don't want the books sent or whatever. Okay, so PICA-PAC, this is, I want to be clear that this is not happening for sure. I wanted to just give you a heads up. There is legislation from last year that requires USBE to obtain some kind of social emotional learning curriculum. It's specifically for, let's see, what's the word they use? Sort of like healthy habits or something like that. And then the legislation was to enter into one of these, and then also there's like a research component included. So that is the case for, this is the product that some of the staff at USBE have entered into or are hoping to enter into, but they're taking it to the board next month. So it's possible that the board will decline this contract. So all this is to say, I'm giving you a heads up on this, but it's not necessarily going to happen with this vendor. Ultimately, we will need to have some kind of vendor that does this. What will happen if it passes is there will be 32 LEAs involved, because it's kind of like a research study, I guess you could say. So if you participate, so first of all, if this passes, and second, if you participate, then you'll need to get a DPA with PikaPack. And in talking with the vendor, we've told them that we felt that it would be really important that this be not an opt-out, but an opt-in for parents. So they would have to actually like sign and say, yes, I agree to using this before any data could be shared with PikaPack and before the students participated. Additionally, there might be a second DPA required with the researchers. So like I say, I want to reiterate, this is not passed yet. It's a maybe. We'll see what happens in board meeting next month. There's another.
Katie, there's
yeah.
another question. I'm not sure if they were asking about Kids Read Now or PikaPack. Mark Allen. He's saying we will not be Title I next year, and I became the interim executive director this morning and do not know if we are part of the grant. I asked our previous director a while back, but never got a response. Does anyone know if Mountain Sunrise Academy is on that grant?
And
So
by and Mark,
question
is the grant you're referring to, is it the Kids Read Now one? Oh, maybe he can't. I don't know if he can even come off mute. But that's a good question. And Mark, I would say if you could shoot me an email, katie.chalice@schools.utah.gov, and I'll put you in contact with the person who could answer that question for you. Okay, Kara, heads up. I am going to need longer than 10:25, so hopefully that's okay with you. This is another, so Bellwether is another maybe. This is another contract that's going before the board next month. The youth in custody staff, so youth in custody means students that are either that are in the custody of the state, either in like the juvenile justice system, or if they also call it custody if they are in the care of the state, so like foster kids. So Youth in Custody has this program that they use in I think 25 LEAs. It's called Check and Connect. It's interesting. So they have like mentors that kind of check in with the kids and that kind of thing. And the Youth in Custody team at USB is wanting to understand like how effective this program is. So they are seeking to contract with a vendor called Bellwether to help them conduct that research. If that goes through, it'll be presented to the board in May, and if the board approves it, then the participating LEAs will need to enter into a data privacy agreement with Bellwether. The thing is, there's only 25 LEAs that even have a Check and Connect program. So I suspect that the Youth in Custody team at USBE, that if this passes, that they will be in contact with the Youth in Custody coordinators at each LEA. But we wanted to give you a heads up on this since you'll likely be involved in obtaining that DPA. And this is also one of those same cases where once one LEA has entered into the agreement, then other people can more easily piggyback off of that. All right, so this one is an interesting one, and this has like some elements of this is definitely going to happen, as well as some elements of we're not sure how this is going to play out. So there was some currently, as you guys may know, there's an early interactive software program where each LEA, and I think even at the school level, different schools can decide within an LEA, can decide which software they want to use. And it's for, I believe, K-3 students. Some of the examples of the software that's currently available that USB has contracted with are, I think Imagine Learning is one of them. Oh, help me out in the chat if you guys can remember some of the other ones. I think Waterford is one. My understanding is that there's 5. So Lexia, thank you. Yeah, Lexia Core 5, I think is one of them.
Elevation.
What is that?
Elevation.
Oh, Elevation is the one for ELL.
ELLs.
Yeah. So currently the way this works is that every school or district can choose which product they want to use. There was a change in legislation in this last session that said, well, now we want to change that so that USB doesn't have the contracts anymore. Now every LEA gets to choose their own vendor, which could be any vendor that's even if they're not listed in that group of 5. So you get to choose who you want to contract with for this, and then you get reimbursed through the Utah grants system or whatever. The reason I'm bringing this to you is because and I should pause and say that first part is definitely going to happen. The second part is up for the board to consider, I think next month, which would be how do we they have to kind of consider like, how are these programs evaluated and how does that play out in terms of data sharing? Yes, Stephen, this was the software for K3 reading. So I think what's probably going to happen, assuming the board passes this, and so there might be changes, but no matter what, you're going to need to get a DPA with the company that you choose to contract with. Depending on what the board decides to do with the board rule, it's possible that you might need to make sure that the DPA includes language about providing data to a third-party evaluator. So what this would look like is if you chose to contract with Imagine Learning, for example, Imagine Learning would need to agree to give some of the data to a program evaluator so that they can assess like how effective the program is. It's all kind of nuanced. More information will come, but I just wanted to give you a heads up about it. All right. And now on to the legislative session. So the legislative session in Utah is very short. It's just January through February. It's about, I think, 6 weeks. So that took place, a couple months ago. There's a book that USBE puts together. Well, it's just a PDF. And this link is also going to be in the closing doc for you to check out, but it's really helpful. And it includes all of the bills that passed that are relevant to education. We are going to be talking about just 4 of those that felt relevant, in my opinion, were relevant for this audience. So here we go. The first one is a law about gender identity policies. From talking with schools, my understanding is that this law will not change the practice of most schools, as far as I understand. So like I reached out to a couple of principals and I said, hey, what's your process? Like if a student wants to, go by a different gender than their birth certificate, what's your process for that? And they said that they would make changes based on the parent's request. So I believe that this law is probably in line with how most of you guys are already doing things, but just to be safe, make sure that you update any of your policies so that 2 things happen. First, a school cannot change a student's record regarding their gender identity without parental consent. So you couldn't have a situation where a kid is like, that is male on their birth certificate, but identifies as female. And if they were like, hey, can you change my information in the SIS? If their parent didn't give consent, then the school is not allowed to make that change according to this law. The law also states that parents need to have access to any information that the school maintains regarding their child's gender identity. And this, to me, this is just kind of a reiteration of what FERPA already guarantees. FERPA already guarantees that parents have access to any of their students' education records, but they just kind of wrote this in there, I think, probably just to guarantee that everything was on the up and up. Robert asks, what happens if a student turns 18 and claims not to be a dependent? Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because in terms of FERPA, the rights transfer to the student at age 18. This law, I don't believe it distinguishes for students that are 18. And so I don't have an answer for you, Robert. I think it's a good question that explores, or that warrants exploration. Okay, so your action item on this one is to update your update any of your policies to reflect these new requirements that, again, I think most of you were already doing in practice, but you just need to make sure that it's official. All right, next one, we've got education related amendments. So this one was actually a modification to our law, which is the Student Data Protection Act. Oh no, that's a lie. That's a different one, I'm sorry. Okay, we've got something in the chat. We received an email earlier this year that indicated we can only identify gender from a birth certificate. Parents have to change the birth certificate if they wish to change gender. Yes, I think that's true. My understanding is that some student information systems might have 2 fields. One is the sex, which is what's on the birth certificate and has to be what's reflected on the birth certificate. That's the field that USBE collects via UTREX. Yeah, okay, so Logan, thanks for reinforcing that. There, and then in some student information systems, there's also a second field that might be gender identity. I'm not sure, Logan, if you want to tell us what it's called in PowerSchool, like the name of that field. But you're right, that is that, I don't know who I'm talking to, Kay James, if that might be Kathy, but oh yeah, viewable versus legal. Mhm. Okay, yeah, good. So this law, I'll just give you a heads up quickly. I don't believe that any action will be required of you directly yet. What's going to happen with this one is it requires USBE to add a web page to our website that has a bunch of policies on it regarding school discipline. So it's an effort to increase transparency for parents on how things are handled in school districts regarding school discipline, including cyberbullying and bullying. And then there's a second part to this bill, which is the one that I feel like most likely applies to you, which is that it allows parents, it's asking that USIMS develop a feature that allows parents to add notes to their child's record. Some people have called this the sticky note bill. So the idea would be that a parent could add at least once a year, and at least that's the way the law is written, is that it would need to be available at least once a year, that a parent could go in and add or change notes to their child's record. So this could be something as simple as, my student has a hard time making friends, or my student, like, it reminds me of what we used to get when I was a classroom teacher. On my disclosure form, I would have a space at the bottom that would say, hey, is there anything else you want me to know about your kid? So I see this feature as something similar to that. And I would get anything from like, my student is awesome, you're gonna love having her in class, to like, one time I had a parent that was like, my kid is colorblind, so please make sure, I was a science teacher, so he's like, please make sure he doesn't like mix chemicals that will explode. And then I think there could be other notes as well. But this is a technical feature that's also going to need to be be created in your student information systems. So that's why I say the action will likely take place later, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And the last legislative update is about cybersecurity reports. So there was a bill that was passed that created a new thing called the Utah Cyber Center. I believe it's like an organization housed within the Department of Technology Services, or DTS, at the state level. I think that's where it is, but it's new. It doesn't exist until this bill created it. And I think the goal is to be just kind of like a place where there's someone who's like got cyber on the brain. And this also requires government agencies, which includes you guys, to report any breaches that occur that affect more than 500 students or parents or any other individuals. You need to report that to the Utah Cyber Center. Because they're brand new, they don't have any contact information yet, but once we have that information, we can send it out to you in our newsletter. But so this is an interesting one. And I'll just reiterate or remind you that Utah law and board rule also requires LEAs to report significant data breaches to our team at USB, to the student data privacy team. So just a reminder that if you're reporting to the Utah Cyber Center, make sure that you let us know as well. And there's also a provision in here that has been interesting for education, because it requires all government websites and email domains to change to be a .gov or a .edu. This is problematic for education because a .edu is reserved for only higher education. So there's been a lot of discussion about how this is going to play out in the K-12 space. And I don't know yet, but my guess is that there's like a feature, there's like a provision in the law that allows agencies to seek a waiver for this. So my guess is that probably LEAs will have to contact the State Division of Technology Services and be like, listen, like, we can't get a .gov and we can't get a .edu. Can you waive this requirement for us? But I don't know for sure how that's going to play out. I imagine more guidance will come to you going forward. Okay, so, and we'll just go through these last ones very quickly. Oh, there is one more legislative update. This one is, this is the one that affects our bill, which is the Student Data Protection Act. And this one just kind of reiterates that you need to not share student data unless it's aggregated or de-identified. And I would add that even de-identified data and even aggregated data should be shared with great caution. But the bill just kind of solidifies that. And then this is the part that's new. The bill says that LEAs can't share student data with a federal agency unless required by federal law. So in my review of this bill, I was kind of trying to think like, is there any situation where that would be problematic? First of all, I don't believe that LEAs are sharing much data with the federal agencies anyway, because it's USBE that's required to do most of the federal reporting. But we want you guys to let us know if you foresee any unintended consequences of this law. Like if there is some kind of data sharing that's going on that we don't know about, that this law would prohibit, and that's going to cause a problem for you, just let us know. Okay, we're going to zoom through these last few. Gear Up Utah is an organization. It's a national organization, but it's Gear Up Utah is Utah specific. They receive, oh, let's see, Carrie, I just saw DCFS. Yes, so DCFS, yes, you can share information with them according to FERPA, or if you get parents sign a release. And it's actually, DCFS is actually a state agency. It's, if we really call it the accurate thing, it would be the Utah Division of Child and Family Services. Yeah, thanks, Carrie. So Gear Up Utah is an organization that serves students who are generally considered at risk of not graduating, or maybe they might graduate, but they are unlikely to attend higher education. So this is, I think it's often largely based on income, and actually, no, I'm remembering now, they provide services to students that are, I think, considered low income at Title I schools. So it sounds pretty cool. They reached out to us and they said, hey, sometimes we want to like provide services to these kids, and the LEAs are reticent to give us data. And I said, well, in a way, that's a good thing, because I'm glad to hear that you guys are being cautious. You are not required to give data to Gear Up Utah, but I do want you to understand that they are a legitimate program, and part of participation in the program, it already requires parental consent. And the parents already agree to share student education records with the mentor that's working with the student. So just so you know, it's not like some random organization. There are a few districts in our state that use Gear Up Utah really heavily, and they have really good success, and it really helps kids out. So your information item here is just, if they come to you, just know that they're legitimate, but again, you're not required to share information with them. But you may, and you can reach out to us if you have any questions. Okay, second to last thing is that our USPA/SDPC public folder has moved. This is the folder that John created that has a lot of really good resources about data privacy agreements, how to enter into one, and model language for sending it out. And John also records his monthly calls and puts them in this folder. So in the closing doc, you'll find the link to the new one. So if you have this bookmarked, you can just bookmark the new one. And oh crap, there's two more. Okay, changes to how long we post videos. USBE has been making some changes to our policy on how long we retain videos. So historically, we've just posted something and just left it up there forever. Now, in general, we're going to be trying to post videos for no longer than like 6 months, just to make sure that everything is current and fresh. So some of our videos, if they are the kind of thing that we want to be available forever, will stay. So like our FERPA videos will all stay, but just a heads up that the webinars that we do, this spring training recording, for example, going forward, those are probably going to be available online for only about 6 months. And the very last thing is that if you are a records officer, we are asking you to update your points of contact, and the instructions on this are in the next slide. And just a reminder that these slides will be made available to you via the closing doc at the end of the session. Tara, I'm really sorry. You can still have your full time. So go ahead and take your full 25 minutes, and then I'll take the time that I ate up, and I'll compensate in my session later. I really apologize for that. So we're going to turn it over to Kara. She's with the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, and I'm really excited for you to hear her presentation that kind of explains the implications and the practicalities of HB 117 from last year. So Kara, go ahead and share when you're ready.
Thanks, Katie. And yeah, no problem on going over. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. 1 second, I'm going to get this going. Okay, great. So yeah, thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit this morning. I'm Kara, and yeah, like Katie said, I'm with the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, and I'm the program manager for the new Safe at Home program, which is what was created when HB 117 was passed. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about the program and its purpose, give some details so that people kind of understand how it works and some of the mechanics of it and who might be in the program, and then talk about the implications for schools. If people have questions, I'm happy to answer them throughout this presentation or at the end. And then also my email address and contact information is included at the end of the presentation if anyone wants to reach out separately later. And if you have any concerns or feedback or anything that I'm not bringing up, I'm very interested. I'm kind of trying to figure out how this program touches on a lot of different areas and state agencies, and I'm not an expert at all of them. So it's helpful for me to have that feedback from you all. So just to give a little information, so HB 117 was passed in 2022, and it created this address confidentiality program. And the purpose of these programs is to protect the residential addresses of victims of domestic violence, stalking, human trafficking, and sexual assault from perpetrators who might still pose a safety threat. And so this it touches on all state and local government agencies and will have implications for schools. The program isn't live yet. My hope is that it goes live by the end of this calendar year, but there's kind of a lot of moving pieces. So there's a possibility that'll be delayed, but I'm hoping that the program is available and up and running by December 2023. And then also these programs, these address confidentiality programs they exist in about 40 states already. So we're a little behind on this, but luckily we're doing it now. And the good news about that is a lot of states are already effectively running these, and we have a lot of resources to reach out where we do have questions or concerns. A lot of states have already found solutions to various problems. So the way that these addresses are protected is program participants are provided with an assigned substitute address that's different from their actual residential address. And this assigned substitute address is going to be the same for all program participants, and it's actually the physical address of state mailing services. And then everyone will have an assigned separate apartment number. So it'll appear like it's a regular residential address with an apartment, but it'll actually be a state office building. And then under the law, state and local government entities are required to use the assigned address in all records and for communication. And there are exceptions to this that are kind of required exceptions. An example is voter registration records, because county clerks need to know the actual address where someone lives in order to get them the correct ballot for their precinct. They'll have the actual residential address, but will have kind of a separate new classification that's extra confidential. So these program participant voters won't show up in voter registration records, and candidates who are running won't receive their contact information. So it just kind of keeps it extra protected, even in the cases where those addresses are really needed. And then also program participants can receive mail at the assigned address, and we'll forward it free of charge. And again, there are exceptions to this. We won't forward packages. So, I mean, we just can't be an Amazon processing center basically, but all first class and certified mail will forward free of charge to their actual residential address, so they can use it as their mailing address for all purposes. So the substitute addresses can be used for a lot of things. They can put their substitute address on their driver's license, which is especially important because this law doesn't apply to private business at all. Private business are not required to use the substitute address for anything. But in most cases, if it appears to be an actual residential address that's on your driver's license, then there's no reason that private business or others are going to question that. So it does allow program participants to use it in other interactions as well. Voter registration records, as I said, they're creating this kind of new extra classified, group of voters that won't be included on any voter registration records. They can use the address on court and law enforcement documents, and with state benefits and services, and then with school enrollment and records, which is the important part for us. So to be eligible for the program, also, excuse me, I'm kind of just getting over a cold. A person must be a victim of domestic violence, stalking, human trafficking, or sexual assault, as I mentioned, who fear that they'd be in danger if the perpetrator knew their residential address. An important thing I should mention is this also can be if they've been threatened with any of these things, but it hasn't yet happened. So if someone is in fear of their partner and what they might do if they leave, then they also are eligible for the program. The person must have moved within the previous 90 days or be moving in the next 90 or live in a location that is unknown to the perpetrator. And that the previous 90 days part is important because also under the law, state and local government agencies need to redact their actual residential address from any records created within the 90 days prior to program enrollment. And then they're required to work with a certified application assistant to apply. And the purpose for that is this program isn't meant to be a comprehensive safety plan for victims. This is really meant to be one tool as part of a larger safety plan for people who are in danger. And we'll come up with a process to certify application assistants. And those application assistants will be people working as victim advocates out in the field who are already interacting with victims.
Kara, can I interrupt you and ask a question?
Yeah, definitely.
There's a question in the chat about how, so USBE or LEAs have to report to USBE the district of residence for a student. So the question from these folks is how do they do that? How do they report the district of residence? Is that something you guys have discussed?
Yeah, so that specifically is not. So I appreciate that question. But so a lot of what we're doing for school enrollment, and this is, there's some burden here, but it won't be an overwhelming amount of people. But is schools need to contact us and say, are they in the right place? And we'll say yes or no, and leave it at that, if that makes sense. So you wouldn't have the actual residential address, but would that information, like if they're in the right school district, would that be enough information? Am I answering the question?
I'll be honest, I'm not involved in reporting, so I'm hoping one of you guys that asked the question can speak up and answer. Tell us if that, and Melissa might know too, I'm not sure. Robert says that will probably work.
So yeah, actually, I'll talk about bus routes in a sec, and I'll get through a couple more slides, and then I have a little bit more information. Maybe I can hold off on these, if that's all right.
Yeah, and another thing that occurs to me is that these are really good questions, and I wonder if we could collect these questions and kind of coordinate with the USBE, UTREX folks, the data and statistics folks, and make sure that all of this can be worked out. So I would say keep your questions coming, we can collect them up, and then Kara can use those to coordinate with USBE.
That sounds great. Okay, so participant responsibilities. So a lot of the onus of making this program work is on victims. Unfortunately, not a lot of things happen automatically once someone enrolls in the program. So they're enrolled for 4 years once they apply and are admitted, and they can stay in as long as they want, just need to reapply every 4 years. And program participants will have an authorization card and a letter that says they're program participants. And that the purpose of it is so they can show that to government agencies or show it, for example, to a school. And it'll be a business card with our contact information, their assigned address, and their name and information. So that if they show up to register a student in school, they would say, I'm part of this Safe at Home program. And then the person at the school would give us a call and say, this person, are they in the program and are they in the right school? And we will confirm, yes, they're a program participant, they're in the right place, use that assigned address for all records. So the purpose is just keeping these people's addresses out of as many places as possible. Basically, we'll have a secure database that's kept extremely secure, and with their actual contact information. But there are these very slim exceptions, and otherwise it just shouldn't be in records. it shouldn't be anywhere grandma searchable. Our database isn't searchable through grandma requests. So we're just trying to keep it out of as many places as possible. They have to update their contact information with us if anything changes, which, I mean, obviously the program doesn't work if we can't get their mail to them and in general get in touch with them. So that's important. And then finally, they need to contact government agencies to change their records to the assigned address. So it is on the program participants to advocate for themselves and say, for example, you know, this isn't my real address, but I'm in this program. And if you have questions, you can contact them. And a big part of our job will be continuing to educate and work with various government employees to kind of figure out solutions in some difficult situations. Okay, so now the important part, how schools are impacted. So schools are required to accept the assigned address as the residential address for records and in communication. So any mailed communications should be going to that assigned fake address and we'll forward it along. And that assigned address is what should be in all records. We can confirm school enrollment eligibility. So that's kind of what our part in that will be. And again, it'll be, we just say, yes, they're in the right place, or nope, they're in the wrong place. And that's the extent of the information we'll provide. Program participation is not confidential, so we can share that, but their contact information, of course, is confidential. And then again, if requested, schools need to redact their residential address from records created within 90 days prior to enrollment. And insofar as bus stops, so again, we have the benefit of many other states already having these programs in place. What a lot of school districts have done is found that if they say, you know, okay, just here's where our bus stops are, which one would you like to use? That's a way that it, again, kind of puts the responsibility on program participants. It gives them the choice to, you know, decide, okay, do they want to have it the closest to their home, or do they want to have it a little bit farther for that kind of extra layer of security? So that's a solution that some folks have found. And then also just especially for school enrollment purposes, so talking with folks in other states, I think some districts are adamant about, okay, we're going to call and confirm they're in the right place. And some districts have felt a little more like, if someone's in the program, then if we see the card, we're going to take their word that they're going to the right place. So it's a little how different schools want to implement it that works for them. But those are kind of the requirements. I'm going to pull up the chat and see. Okay, I'm going to pull up the chat and answer some questions in there, if that's all right. From Robert, are LEAs required to keep the count of 4 years, or will a notification be provided? You would not need to keep the count. That would be on us. So if someone leaves the program, then I suppose it isn't that all state agencies will be notified, but if someone chooses to leave the program, they can share their true address if they'd like. And if we can't get in touch with them, people will be removed from the program. The UTREX errors, I think that's something that we should talk about and how to deal with that. Yeah, and then can I ask, or I guess maybe we should take it offline on the district of residence for students. What do you think, Katie? Should that be a separate conversation, or?
I think that would be great. A lot of the folks on this call are heavily involved in that. Other folks are not. So that does strike me as something that like a smaller group could hammer out.
Okay, that sounds good. And I'll reach out to you and see if we can come up with a group of folks to work on that. Are there any other concerns or questions right now about how this might kind of play out, or where it, could potentially be difficult, or, some foreseeable challenges? That is an excellent question, Stephen, and I don't know the answer to that right now, but I will write that down and give that some thought.
And I'll just verbalize the question for the folks who are watching the recording later. Stephen asked, if someone moves, thus changing their boundary school, but are still in the program, will the school be notified that they moved? And Kara, sounds like you're gonna take that question.
Yeah,
Heather, to your question about the Utrecht team, yes, I think that's right. I think it would be, I would anticipate that we'd pull in Utrecht and data and stats and Kara, and maybe some LEAs to figure that out.
oh,
Let's
okay,
do-
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the information I have to share. If there aren't other questions or comments or feedback, and then also there's my contact information if anyone wants to get in touch with me offline after this meeting.
Thanks, Kara. Are you okay if we add your contact information to our closing document that we'll go send out to folks?
Yeah, that would be great. Please do. All right. Well, thank you all so much for your time. And yeah, we'll talk about some of these things offline, and I'll get back to you with answers and more information when I have it.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kara. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm trying to stop sharing my screen now. There we go. Thanks.
Is it my turn?
Yes, it's John's turn.
All right. I'm really excited about this, actually. As Katie mentioned, when we first started talking, that I've had my hands in the SDPC world and data privacy agreements for about 2+ years. And so now marrying a lot of that work with a lot of the compliance piece has really been helpful for me to just get a really good grasp of the entire landscape. And with that being said, I have some things to share that I think are very helpful, and I'm really excited about. So this is a URL that you can join us with. This presentation has some hyperlinks in it. My goal for this presentation, for those of you that are joining us, is to provide clarity for you on how to remediate your compliance review report, should you need to. And, you know, really to just get everybody excited about all of the progress that we've made. I think that everybody should be really proud, and we've got some metrics that will demonstrate that. So if sometimes you're looking at me and I'm looking up here, it's because I'm looking up here and I'm not looking down there. But so anyway, please join me. Let's get going. So today's annual compliance review, we're going to get a little bit into the weeds of some of this stuff. I'm anticipating that there's quite a few of you. Let me make sure that I'm actually on the right. Okay, because I just wanted to make sure that we're talking about the correct things. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more into the weeds of some of the laws and regulations, but not a ton. That's why this is a hyperlinked document. You know, there's quite a few of you that have been here for, you know, longer than most of us and helped create a lot of this infrastructure. And there are those of you that maybe this is your first time speaking to us. And if this is your first time working with us, please let us know in the chat so that we know who our new friends are and if we can provide you with any extra support. But these are the pieces of evidence that I took a look at. I would also like to thank most of you, all of you, for your patience in regard to this report. We have had some turnover and some different, you know, just adjustments, and me actually, you know, learning how to read the spreadsheet of doom. It's the biggest spreadsheet I've ever seen in my life, but it's super amazing. And I commend Katie for all of the work that she's done in this, and David and Whitney as well in creating this infrastructure. Anyway, so we're going to talk about these pieces. We're going to get into the review results and then some conclusion and action items. My hope is that you can have your reports viewable to you so that you can kind of run down in conjunction. We're going to crosswalk some stuff. If you have things that you need to correct, that hopefully, you know, you can correct it by the end of today. We'll talk about the process for doing that. I don't think that many of us are very far off from having a glowing report, and that's something that I really want to highlight here in the next little bit. So let's talk about the annual notice of FERPA rights. Rights. And as you can see here, this is a hyperlink. If you want to click on this, we'll give you access to a lot of the supporting resource. So lots of stuff on here. What our annual notice of FERPA rights consists of is what we can see, this 4 parent rights: to inspect and review, to seek and amend, inaccurate, misleading violations, that they can amend those things. There's consent to disclosures of personally identifiable information. So that would be anything that you do with like a third party. And then they know how to file a complaint with FERPA. There's a whole lot of stuff on here. And guess what? Some of you may have had an incomplete on this. And on your report, this little link down here, you can click it and it will take you to our Canvas page that will instruct you on how to remediate this specific piece, which, if you were to do so, would be as easy as downloading this document, which you can click on now if this is a piece that you're missing, and go through and augment it in the pieces that may need you to specify the name of your school, who wish to ask the school or principal these little pieces here so that you can customize it. You could even click this right here and download it. And then upload that to your school's website and put annual notification of FERPA rights, and you could essentially pass that piece. Next, the notice of forwarding records to other schools. This is a part of the annual FERPA notice. Some of you may want to check your language. A lot of what I did when I checked this was I would go to your FERPA rights and I would do, a lot of them are PDFs. I would do a Control F and look for these pieces upon request. It was a nice little thing that's tucked into the language or to officials of the school. This is not necessarily something that is a have to piece, but this is a you probably should piece to incorporate into your annual notice of FERPA rights. And a lot of times you can see this is what it would be. We suggest you add a notice of forwarding records. This is what it would look like if this was missing to your annual notice of FERPA rights. And as you can see here, the one that we just looked at, it just so happens to have that piece already baked in. So by downloading this and uploading it to your website and then conducting all of the little tiny resubmission pieces that we've set up, this can be taken care of probably in about 4 minutes. Okay. Oh no, what happened? Oh, I downloaded it. See, be careful what you wish for. Okay. And then here you can see upon notice, and it gives you the language that you would want to include. Directory information notice. So directory information notice is the annual notice. This is another one of those kind of federal pieces that we want to include for parents and eligible students that describes the data elements. The LEA would not generally be considered harmful or an invasion of privacy if disclosed. LEAs are allowed to disclose this information to the general public without needing parental consent. This notice can be altered and adjusted for the specific needs of each individual school and does not need to be consistent across an LEA. As you can see here, here are some typical things. And if you clicked on this, it would take you to our course, which would show you a lot of additional things that this could include. LEAs may not designate the following information as student information. And these are essentially the 2 pieces that you'll find here, the social security number and the student ID number. And as you can see here, this will hyperlink this to that piece if you'd like to do that. And of course, you could come up with this all on your own. But you know, Katie has done a lot of work to create a corresponding data manager Canvas course that has all of this information in it. And it's also going to give you examples of things that you're going to want to include. This is some of where folks had incompletes on a lot of theirs, was in this area of when they would need to be notified that there's a due date for opting out of directory information. And so some of those dates have not been updated or they've been omitted. So those are pieces that you'd want to look at. This is what a typical incomplete would look like. Notice the date and the timeline of parents have requested to opt out, et cetera, et cetera. But here's a model document that you can go in and customize, and you can over here, you know, like it'll correspond with the Canvas course of the different things. There's something that is kind of adjacent to this that it talks about in the Canvas course that we won't talk about now, which is called a limited directory information notice, in the sense that you can kind of do more of like an a la carte piece. That may be preferable in some instances, depending upon the size and scale of your LEA. However, it can be very difficult to manage all of those specific metrics for your student body. So that's one thing that you may want to look at. But again, here is a model document that you can check. Let me take a little commercial break real quick and look at the chat. Yes, I sent these out on Monday. If you did not get yours, it was because either it may have gone to somebody that completed the assessment or the responses, that's maybe no longer at your agency, or I did not get your submission. And there were 17 LEAs who have not yet submitted. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm very hopeful that we'll get that taken care of actually relatively quickly. Let's talk about this little thing that's tucked in to the Directory Information Notice, this Military Recruiter and Institutions of Higher Education Notice. Most times it's this part of institutions of higher education that's been omitted. So what you can see here, this is a direct language out of our Canvas course. This is not applicable to anyone that does not have 11th or 12th graders. So if you have 11th or 12th graders, this is something that is applicable to you. If you do not, then this is not a metric that is applicable to you. If there is a mistake in your report regarding whether or not we have you listed as having 11th or 12th graders, please let us know that. I will also say, once I sent out the report, my email inbox filled up relatively quickly. I'm not ignoring everybody. I understand that we have a sense of urgency at wanting to get this corrected, and I too have a sense of urgency. I'm not ignoring all of you, but I'm going to actually talk about how amazing that fervor amongst this community is. So we'll get to that. But then, as you can see here, that there is this piece that's normally omitted, but not not higher education. That's the part that's usually written. It's the higher institutions. So as in this very high resolution screenshot, you can see that we suggest adding language to your notice. This is actually a clickable link, I believe, that'll take you to that piece. But as you can see here in that directory information notice piece, it is also included, and it says right here to provide military recruiters or institutions of higher education. So this would then meet the requirements for that piece. Next, student data collection notice. Oh, I'd also like to reiterate that directory information or anything that uses that does not refer to anything that is like a student directory, something that you would think is like the school's white pages, you know, so that you can call your son's friend and see if they want to have a play date or something like that. That is not the directory information piece. That's a totally separate kind of idea. Student data collection notice. These are the pieces that are involved in that. If you got something that needed to be corrected, we could go in and you can check that. But I hope that some of you are seeing a theme in that. If this was something that was missing for whatever reason, there is a model document that you can click on right now and update, and you can add that to your privacy ecosystem on your website. That's one thing I'd like to echo. There are, you know, in checking 139 of our 156 LEA submissions, all of you have lots of very creative ways on your websites of sharing and displaying this information. What I've seen has been a best practice with a lot of LEAs has been actually setting aside a student data privacy page that has these elements in it. It's very clearly labeled. You could say metadata dictionary and or approved applications. What one of the LEAs has done that I thought was very cool was had all of their training elements for their LEA in regards to data privacy. And you can link to the stuff that we've already created for you in that little interface there. So if you're looking at what's the best way to curate all of this information and put it on your website so that next time we go to look at this, like it's just a split second, I can help you with that. I'd be interested in showing you some examples of some best practices that are out there. Okay, so this would be the student data collection notice. And like I've said, the theme is we already have a model document for you. So if you're missing this, it could take you about 3 to 4 minutes to get it up and going. A data governance plan. This is essentially the very detailed processes and procedures that your LEA uses to protect student data. This is straight from our Canvas course. It says it should have these at minimum 7 topics addressed. In some of the reports, you can see here an incomplete report would be update the retention and expungement policy in your policy. policy. And like our theme of the day is, I'm teaching you how to fish. I was really quickly trying to create a cartoon while the other presenters were going and showing me like fishing and looking over at Troy being like, Troy, this is how you fit. But it didn't work out that quickly. Anyway, maybe in the future. We have an LEA data governance plan, model document that you can fill out these yellow spaces to, and of course it's longer than these 2 pages. But you can then add this to your student data privacy interface. And actually, this is not something that we want you to just fill out and put on your website. Like, there's value to these documents. There's value to this guidance. And what it really does is it helps create an infrastructure in your agency that really does promote this privacy culture that we like to adhere to. So these are some results of the things that we just saw. So what I'm really saying is, of 156 LEAs, 139 submitted this year. So 89% of the state's LEAs. Of those 89%, this translates down here to the 139. You're looking at, 135, 124, 133, 135, like the level of, fidelity that we have across, 89% of our state LEAs when it comes to these policies is very encouraging to me. What it says to me is that we have very little work to do to improve these numbers. And then when it comes to the remaining 17 LEAs, it's just going to be a matter of how we just set up and curate their infrastructure from the beginning. So this is a very, very promising piece of information. Metadata dictionary. Okay, so this is the year that we really kind of jumped into the MDD, and this is one of the reasons why I think it took a little bit longer, besides my learning curve of what this audit actually, this review check, this compliance review check was about. But with the metadata dictionary piece, it really put focus on the tools that you're using, the amount of information that you're including in these tools. And I'm really excited about the potential for this piece. So let's just jump in real quick to metadata dictionary. So this is the law. These are the things we checked for. Metadata dictionary means a record that defines and discloses. So we have to have some sort of mechanism on your website that has the definitions and the data points. I bet there's a model document for that. Anyway, or a couple of them. Comprehensively lists the recipients with whom the education entity has personally identifiable student data, including the purpose. We're going to talk about purpose a little bit. This one's a little nuanced, not super nuanced, but we want to have kind of a little bit more clear communication about what a purpose is and what a purpose isn't. The justification, you know, who gives you kind of jurisdiction over distributing this piece of technology or third-party vendor. And then under FERPA or federal law, what is the exception? And then this piece right here, that it is displayed on your website. Pretty simple. So this is what an incomplete piece could look like. Is it most folks have something on their website that says metadata dictionary. There is one LEA that still is pointed to the old data gateway tool that no longer exists. I'm glad that we as a state have really kind of turned the page on that thing, and we're really in the mindset of working with the tools that we do currently have available to us. But this would be an example of the required changes. A lot of this seems very cumbersome. A lot of this sounds like you're going to have to hire a staff member to just go and do this. And I'm here to tell you that these yellow and red marks are not something that you should worry yourself with, because there's a lot of fish in this pond, and I'm going to teach you how to get them out of here. Okay, so next would be, well, this is an example built into SDPC that some folks have linked to in addition to what they have. And this would serve the purpose of those data elements and definitions. And they're all listed in there. I'll show you in just a moment how the tools that we've given you access to have this baked in. But if these are things that you are missing, these are elements that are very, very easy to add to that data privacy interface that you have on your website. It's essentially maybe just creating a link that goes to this, or you know, that's something that we can talk about in our remediation meeting. Purpose. For each product resource in your MDD, you should provide a brief description of why you are sharing the PII with the recipient. Your stated purpose is usually something about why you are using the product or resource, not necessarily the technical description of why the vendor needs that specific information. So essentially what we're looking for, and these are some examples of purposes, but the essence of a metadata dictionary is that we want, I'm a parent, you know, there's other folks on the team, a lot of you are parents. I want to be able to go to my LEA's website and say, what is the purpose of this tool? And the purpose being kind of like, what is the advertisement? What's that elevator speech of this is why we use it and this is who we use it with? So there are instances, and right here, if you use SDPC and you are missing purposes on your metadata dictionary, you can see there's some of these missing. There is a kind of a weird little way that you have to sneak in to do that, and that tutorial is linked right here. So you can find that. So if you're missing purposes, click on the tutorial and or go into your Google Sheet or Learn platform. And we'll talk about what purpose looks like in Learn platform in just a minute, because Learn has some of those things built in, but that goes back to this technical description. Learn platform, it may be like for Adobe or Canvas, like join a class now. Like that doesn't necessarily, I mean, a lot of us know what Canvas is, but that doesn't necessarily meet the spirit of what we're looking at. Justification, it comes back to these three pieces. If you use SDPC, this is a drop-down menu for Learn platform. Madra, who is our customer service rep, and I'll show you an example of what this could look like. They've built in some of this stuff for your public library that you can use. And like I said, if you've got any pinks over here, your tutorial is included in this. So justification and exception, how to change those is located in this tutorial. If you are an SDPC user, if you can just change those columns in your Google Sheet if that's what you use. It's like I said, mostly it's going to be the school official exception in FERPA. And on Learn Platform, some folks have used badges, other folks have used some of those tags. This is what a great metadata dictionary looks like on the Google Sheet template that we have. You can see here, it's got the data recipient, it's on their website. The purpose or description is very kind of detailed. You know, Aspire is an SIS, student information system. And then it's got a checkbox in each one of these areas. And as you can see, there could be instances where there's two. You know, DLM has a federal requirement. What's the FERPA exception, etc. So we just want to make sure that that is all filled out and comprehensive. Some of these are just missing little tick boxes here and there. On SDPC, you can see here that Troy has that data elements and definitions linked right up here to his, which is fantastic. For a lot of you that use SDPC, you can open, there's another yellow button that gets embedded right here. Most of you already have that. It's baked in. So that meets that requirement. SDPC, unlike the other tools, has this aspect where you can actually click on the agreements and see what the agreements are. The agreements are not listed on any of the other tools. And as you can see here too, this is where our purpose, justification, and FERPA exception is listed for all of our different tools. And then we've got, you know, all sorts of different data. I mean, SDPC is designed specifically to meet the requirements of this compliance check. And this is an example of how a purpose does not work in Learn Platform, and a lot of times it does, but Creative Cloud for schools, universities, and education doesn't necessarily work. However, Caleb's put in here, Creative Cloud gives users access to a collection of software developed by Adobe for graphic design, video editing, etc., etc. I'm a parent, I totally know what that is used for now. Justification, FERPA exception. We've got all the stuff on here. Right here, this is his link that'll take him to that data definitions piece. This passing grade. So here's the metadata dictionary compliance review stuff. There's a lot of weird colors on here, so I'm going to go through and explain. Of the 139 that submitted this year, we have 31 passing metadata dictionaries. 22% of the LEAs in the state have passing metadata dictionaries. Now that sounds pretty slim. When we go back to what it was looking like for all of those policies when they were in the 90s, high 90s, and now we've got 22% for this. Of all the LEAs in the state, 24 got a perfect all pass. 17% of all LEAs. That's pretty significant. These look like low numbers, but let me kind of paint the picture. Last year, there were 8 passing metadata dictionaries. We've gone from 8 to 31. It's a growth of 23 LEAs and 15% growth over the course of that 1 year. Let's keep that momentum in that. Here's some quick little graphs. Let me see. I don't know how much time I want to spend on these graphs because I've got some time. Okay. So as of April 15th, last Saturday, my birthday, there were 156 LEAs total. This was the day before I got all of your reports taken care of. Of those 156, 139 of you are completed and received reports. Maybe not to the correct email address. Oh, thanks. I turned 45. Do I look 45? Anyway. Of those, 17 are now in what I call coach and counsel. It's not, punitive. I just want to get everybody up to speed because I have goals and I want to talk to you about my goals. And this looks like, okay, like roughly 20%, or it's only 10% that we need to work on, 11%. That's not too bad. Of the 156, 90%, or 90 total have all of your policy documents compliant. So directory information, FERPA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have all of those. That's that 90%. There's only, a certain amount that submitted that don't have that. But all in all, like, we're really good on that. And then there's, this percentage that we just need to tweak it here. And a lot of these are the folks that haven't submitted yet also. So this looks pretty daunting, but I assure you, I am not daunted. The next is metadata dictionary. Like I said, of those, 31 are totally compliant. That's great right here. There are 108 that we are in this coaching council. Holy cow, 108. That seems like a lot of work, but I assure you, I have broad shoulders and I've got a plan. And then unknown are those 17 that we haven't worked with yet. Now those 17 may have compliant MDDs, but they haven't yet submitted their survey because I've been in I know that there's some folks from down in St. George that have asked me to look at their stuff and do a resubmission, and I haven't responded to you yet, Bruce Hatch, and I apologize. I've been busy, but you're on my mind. Compliance with these are the LEAs that received an all pass. I know. I just wanted to give everybody, look, this is great. That means that they passed everything, all their policy documents, all their metadata dictionary stuff. It looks really great. I'm really proud of all of this. And I don't want those of you that your names aren't on this list to feel bad because of my plan. So here's kind of my conclusion and some action items, okay? We're really close to compliance. Like, we're really close. I look at these metrics and I see like there are little tweaks here and there that all of you could take that I could guess, like if I did my job today, and you can go back and watch this presentation, or you can see how easy it is for you to just make these tweaks, and I've taught you how to fish on your own. You find some time, maybe next week you're fine. You know, maybe we meet for a little bit, we need to talk it through and get it going. Maybe you haven't submitted yet, and we've got to just, you know, I'll take a look at it and I can spit out a report, you know, relatively quickly. But what I'd like to say is we're really close to compliance statewide. The average amount of missing elements on the metadata dictionary is 15 for those that have missing. That's only like it says right here, 3 products per agency. That's like, you didn't put in something for Canvas, like, oops, let's go click and put those 3 things in, done. Like, it's that simple. Those emails that I got yesterday and Monday are from probably more than 20 of you that have already submitted your report because it was fairly simple, or maybe I screwed up and didn't see something on your Learn Platform thing that was a little badge. You know, I'm only human. But that should push our numbers up already, and we haven't even done anything. This training, I'm hoping it will increase compliance. We've set up a remediation process for LEAs to schedule time with our team. I'm going to talk to you about that in just a second. I'm really excited about that. And I do not think that this is out of the realm of possibilities. Like, 22% of metadata dictionaries now, 8% last year, 22% this year. I'm confident that, like, if we can buckle down as a state, and like if you really need assistance, which I don't think many of you do, you can schedule an hour with me and we can have you locked down. And most of you can probably have it all locked down by the end of the call. I mean, not really, you're not going to do it during the call because you're listening to the call, but you get what I'm saying, that the amount of time that it's going to take to do this. My goal is 90% of us statewide are green. And with that being said, if we can get this compliance stuff and turn it into like a management piece to where we're getting our agreements, we're renewing our agreements, we're keeping our stuff online, we're keeping all of our stuff updated, which, you know, we're not creating all this stuff from scratch anymore. We've all done the big lift. 90% of us are going to be done with this compliance piece, and we're going to get into the stuff that we as a team really want to get into, which is, yeah, Tanya, you're right. We can talk about that. It doesn't have to supposed to be anywhere. We can talk about yours is fine. But continuing our presence in the data privacy realm nationwide. I mean, I think that we as a team want to start getting into what we call like these privacy soft skills, and, you know, talking to teachers and staff about, you know, having what we call like this cone of silence, where we're not talking about youth in front of other youth and things like that. Things where we can have this culture of privacy in our agencies. And I'd like to really tell you that we as a state always hear, I'm in conversations nationwide. We as a state are very mature when it comes to this space nationwide. There are states that have no idea about how to even begin this. There are states that, I mean, legislatively, there are states that don't have an organization like the state agency that's spearheading a lot of this. Some of them, like California, has got a nonprofit organization that's spearheading a lot of this stuff. We have laws, we have teams, we have resources. A lot of the resources that you use are used nationwide. Cool, I get to stop talking a little bit. You know, Katie and I get to go and talk to some folks in Chicago in a little bit, and we get to boast about all of the work that you guys do. There's actually even a metric that we're talking about that I'd really like some feedback on from some of the LEAs in regard to the usage of SDPC and essentially how that Exhibit E, the ability to just subscribe onto something, how much legal, contractual, attorney money that has been saved through the ability to acquire and obtain and subscribe to DPAs really quickly. I think that that would be a very interesting metric for us to take a look at, because it really does. I mean, that's the point, is for it to save time and resources. This is it. This is my new thing. You can go here and you can book time with me. We don't have to play that game of when are you free. I'm free when you need me. You can essentially, you know, if you want to just talk about baseball or, you know, local rock music, we can have like a 30-minute meeting. If we want to do a remediation for your privacy compliance, my hope, let me put this out there before anybody goes and clicks on this, is that you will take the time to go through this thing that we've looked at, that you've learned to fish on your own, and you can correct it. You can go through and you can click the resubmission piece and kind of take care of it on your own. And if there's pieces that we aren't understanding, or if we need to kind of go in and dig in, or you're new to all of this and we need to talk about this, you please schedule one of these with me. And then if you use the Google Sheet, or you are new to SDPC, or you use Learn Platform and you want to transition to SDPC or have that in addition to what you're already using, then you can use this for us to schedule an SDPC onboarding. I think that's it. I think that my time as your game show host today is over. And thank you very much.
Thanks, John. While I'm pulling up my slideshow, does anyone have any questions for John?
Oh, look, there's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Resources being spent to follow up on exhibitees that are not valid with an agreement that wouldn't have pursued in the past. Yeah, Tanya, you're right. So the thing is that there's all sorts of really cool ways that you can do Learn. I've seen different ways that people have done Google Sheets. That's really cool. You know, we love SDPC because of how standardized it is and how clean it is. We're just really excited that all of you are using these tools. And the one thing that I think that Katie and I talk about so often, and the rest of the team, is how fluent for something. Privacy isn't something that is what takes up your lives, but you have all become so fluent in the language that we use, in sharing that with the folks that you work with. And we're just really excited about some of the things that we have up our sleeves.
Do you want to speak to Tanya's question?
A non-best practice place? A non-best practice would be, I've seen ones where, well, we actually saw one where it was like what was it, like a Word doc where they had it in the, but they just essentially the law is a document or display that has all of those facets. So all three of them are fantastic. It really, I mean, honestly, it really just depends on your agency's size and scale and the amount of tools that you use and how often you're updating things. I mean, for a small LEA, that Google Sheet is fantastic. For a middle-sized LEA, SDPC is fantastic. And we've heard from some really large LEAs that SDPC isn't necessarily super easy over the course of time. Like Alpine, our largest, you guys use SDPC, but like, you know, and Learn is really great for that teacher facing side. And a lot of our agencies, I mean, if you are really interested in learning more about Learn, you can talk to some folks at Washington, or, you know, talk to me and I can connect you with Madra at Learn. They're fantastic. And there is no best practice would be just having something that doesn't have the stuff on it.
Thanks, John. All right, well, our final presentation is on Utah PPRA, and let's just dive in, I think. So we've got 3 learning intentions for this session, I guess you could call it. The first is, my goal for you guys is to walk away with an understanding of the purpose and scope of Utah PPRA. And actually, I just want to pause here and say, I think it was like 2 years ago that we also did a session on this. So I realize that this is not brand new to some of you, but in our experience, this has been a topic that has been of increasing interest, and also is like maybe not fully understood by most folks. So that's the impetus for this session. So learning intention number 1 is to understand the purpose and scope of Utah PPRA, know how to evaluate real life situations using this law, and finally, know the requirements when seeking parent permission. So let's dive in. We're going to start with understanding the purpose and scope. So first of all, you might be wondering, my guess is that many of you have not heard the term Utah PPRA, and that is because we made it up. So in the past, this was called, this same law we used to call Utah FERPA, and let me give you some more information about that. So Utah PPRA is a Utah version of a federal law. The federal law is called the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, or PPRA. It's pretty old. It's almost as old as FERPA. It's passed in 1978. And then later, Utah passed its own version of this law, which is 53E-9-203. This one was passed in 1994. And what it does is it kind of tightens up some of the requirements in the federal version. So it makes the requirements for student or for parent consent stronger, and adds some clarity to when you have to be careful about these topics and that kind of thing. Well, here's the deal. When they made this law in 1994, they called it Utah FERPA, to my personal everlasting dismay, because it has nothing to do with FERPA. It's like the Utah version of PPRA. So for a long time, we just struggled through and we just called it Utah FERPA, and always were explaining like, oh, we call it Utah FERPA, but it's really PPRA. So finally, we just decided enough of that. We're just going to call it Utah PPRA, because that's what it is. So going forward, you should hear that term for us, and we won't be using the term Utah FERPA anymore, even though that's what it used to be called. All right, so what is Utah PPRA? It's a privacy law. So FERPA, which we've talked about a lot and most educators are really familiar with, is a law that protects the data that we already have. We have it in place, we want to protect it. But PPRA is a little different because it protects what data we collect from students in the first place, which is also really important. So it's kind of an interesting twist on privacy that way. The goal of this law, and I'm just going to read this. The goal of the law is to protect students from being put in a position where they feel compelled to answer questions on certain protected topics. So let's go through those topics. There are 8 of them that are defined in this law. The first is political affiliations or political philosophies, mental or psychological problems, sexual behavior, orientation, or attitudes. And I'll just make a note here that doesn't expressly say anything about gender identity. And the Utah's Attorney General's office has declined to kind of weigh in on whether or not gender identity falls into this category. But I do have some guidance for you on asking questions about gender identity that we'll get into later. Another protected topic is illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, or demeaning behavior, religious affiliations or beliefs, income, and then the last two are also protected, but I think are far less common. I haven't seen examples of this in like a survey, for example. Okay, so let's dive in. So this is where I wanted to get into kind of the purpose and scope. One thing that's interesting about this law is that, as you guys know, there are lots of concerns about what is being taught in schools. This law can be kind of confusing because if you looked at those 8 protected topics, you might think that those are protected topics, but means that those are topics that cannot be discussed in schools. This law, other laws might address that, but this law does not. This law is not talking about what can be taught in schools. Instead, it's talking about protecting students' privacy. It doesn't dictate what can be taught. The law, another way of saying that is that the law addresses seeking information from students and doesn't address giving information to students. That's why it's a privacy law. All right, so on this slide, you're seeing lots of tiny text, which is you don't have to read, but I've just put it there for reference in case you want to come back to it later. This is the language in the law. It's only a small part of the law, but this is kind of the meat of it. But what I've done is I've put a bar down here that is my Katie language version of this. So I've taken the law and put it into kind of like normal person language and simplified it. So law's here for you to reference, but let's focus on this Katie language. And it says, in order to give a student a survey that asks about the 8 protected topics that we talked about a minute ago, and if those questions are asked regarding the student or their family members, then you must get written parental consent before you give a kid that survey. That's the essence of the law. Oh yes, thank you, Melissa. Protection of People Rights Amendment. So the very best example of this is the SHARP survey. The SHARP survey is full of questions that would require parental consent. Let's look at a couple of them. This question, these are screenshots taken straight from the questions, which by the way, everyone has access to, including parents, and that's purposeful. Everyone should be able to see the questions before they decide if they want their students to take the survey or not. So here's an example question. Have you or your brothers or sisters, or have any of your brothers or sisters ever drunk beer, wine, or hard liquor, smoked marijuana, taken a handgun to school? These all fall into that category of that protected topic of illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, and demeaning behavior. Another example question on the SHARP survey is, which is your religious preference? And this one is asking about the student, what is their religious preference, which is also a protected topic. So either one of these questions would require the entire survey to have parent consent. And to be clear, what I mean by parent consent is it's not just like notifying the parent and then they can, and the parent can opt out if they want to. What's really going on here is you need to wait until a parent has actively told you, I'm okay with my kid taking this survey. The default is to not give them the survey unless the parent has granted active permission. And this is why this practice is in place already in your schools. For those of you who are administering the SHARP survey, you know that this is an important practice to make sure that you're not only giving parents notice of the survey, but you're making sure that they actively give consent before you administer it. Okay, so that's the SHARP survey for us. Here's a couple little nuances. So sometimes people wonder, well, what if the survey is optional? Does it still require, for the SHARP survey, for example, would a survey like the SHARP survey require parent consent if it was optional? And the answer is yes, it doesn't matter if it's optional or not. The parent consent requirement still applies. Another question we get is, well, what if the survey is anonymous? And the answer is, doesn't matter. Parent consent is still required, assuming that it touches on one of those 8 protected topics in relation to the student or the student's family. Okay, and I hope you guys will just throw questions in the chat as we're going. I know I'm just like zooming along. Now that we understand kind of the purpose and scope of PPR8, we're going to do the next section, which is my favorite, which is where we're going to kind of evaluate some real life situations. So I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different examples of survey questions, and we'll kind of walk through them together and decide if these questions would require parental consent or not, according to this law. Okay, so here's our example question up here. We've got the Katie language down here, and then this pink bar is what we're going to use to evaluate this example question. And then up here, I've got the list of protected topics for you to refer to. So let's take a look at this question. Again, we're trying to decide if it would require parental consent. The question says, which way do your parents typically lean politically? Conservative, progressive, moderate, other, none of the above. Go ahead and type in the chat if you think that this question addresses any of the protected topics, and if so, which one? You can use the letter if you'd like. Okay, great. A lot of folks are saying A, political philosophies and affiliations. You're exactly right. This addresses political philosophies. So we've determined that yes, this does touch on a protected topic. The next question we need to ask is, are we talking about the political topic or political philosophy in general, or are we asking the student to reveal information about themselves or their family members? So go ahead and type in the chat. Do you think that this question, yes or no, is prompting the student to reveal information about the students or their student family members, yes or no? Yes, you're right. So we're not just saying, hey, what are the political parties in the United States? We're saying, hey, what about your parents? And so this is a clear example of a question that would require written parental consent before you gave a survey that contained this question. All right,
Katie, I'm sorry to interrupt. A question came up in the chat from Angela. How about the recently state mandated climate survey, currently open until May 5th? Several of those topics are addressed. It is anonymous and parents were notified, but it was set up as an opt-out scenario rather than an opt-in. Yes,
Angela, you're spot on. And we're going to actually talk about that in a couple slides. I'll tell you, I guess I should just tell you now. No, I'll tell you later. But actually, a couple of the questions we're going to walk through in this practice section are straight from the school climate survey. So hopefully, if I don't answer your question by the end of this, make sure you give me a nudge and remind me. Okay, our next practice question says, do you or any of your family members have a mental illness or emotional disorder? First, we need to decide if this is addressing a protected topic. So go ahead and put it in the chat. Is there a protected topic that this addresses? And if so, which one? Okay, great. A lot of you are saying B, and I agree. This is a question asking about the mental or psychological problems. Next, we need to ask ourselves the mental, or psychological problems of whom? Is it about, are we asking about the student or the student's family members? Go ahead and type in the chat, yes or no. Is this about the student or student family members? Yes or no? Great, yes, it absolutely is. In this case, oh, I said the student, but it's actually both. It's you or any of your family members. So again, a clear example of a question. If you were to ask this question on a survey, you would definitely have to get active written parental consent first. Our next practice question. Most of the time, I feel happy at this school. This is an interesting one. So go ahead and type in the chat if this addresses any of the protected topics, and if so, which one? So sometimes when people see this, if they see a question that's asking about the student's feelings, like their happiness or not, they might think that that is addressing mental or psychological problems. The assessment of our Attorney General's office has said that's not what's going on here. This is assessing a student's emotional experience while at school. We're not asking them if they have a kind of mental illness. If we were, that would definitely require parental consent. But in this case, we're just kind of asking them, how do you feel at school? And so this doesn't fall into one of the protected topics, but we are asking about the student. So this is an example of a case where it might not be a protected topic, but it is asking about the student or the student's family member. But because it's not both, then you wouldn't need to get written parental consent before issuing a survey that has this question. I should pause here and say, though, that just because you don't have to get written parental consent doesn't mean you're not allowed to. And if there's ever any question, I would err on the side of providing notice and an opportunity to opt out at a minimum. We want parents to feel comfortable with what's going on in their schools. And so just kind of giving parents a heads up about survey questions that you're asking. School climate survey is a good example of one of those, that it's a good idea to give them a heads up and communicate to them that the student does not have to take the survey. All right, here's another one. Do you ever engage in any of the following? Sexting, sexual harassment. This is a question asked to students. Sexting, sexual harassment, student verbal abuse of teachers, substance abuse. Go ahead and type in the chat if you think this touches on a protected topic, and if so, which one? Oh, that's interesting. Most people are saying C. I would have said D. But yeah, I think it could probably be both. I think it's easy to say that this does touch on the protected topics. And again, I thought of illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, or demeaning behavior. Who is it asking about? Student and family members, or just other people? Is it asking about student or families? Yes or no in the chat? Yes. And so would you have to get parental consent before asking a survey question like this? Absolutely, yes. All right, we'll go through the next ones quickly. This is an interesting question because it's the same topics. So it's still about illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, or demeaning behavior. But the question asks, do the following types of problems occur often at this school? So we're not asking the student to reveal information about themselves or their family members. And so this question would not require written parental consent. Again, that doesn't mean you wouldn't want to give parents notice, but it wouldn't, according to this law, you wouldn't have to get active parental consent. Okay, so back to Angela's question about the school climate survey. Does the school climate survey require parental consent? The answer is no, it does not. In other words, if a parent doesn't give you a permission slip that says, yes, you can give it to my student, then you are permitted to administer the survey. However, it is really important to note that the survey is optional. Also, I would say the more notification you can give to parents, the better, and really communicate to them how important it is to let them know that they can opt out and that you're going to honor their opt-out request. I also recommend, and this is, by the way, I'm saying but this is also the guidance that I know you've received from the USP folks who work with this survey. I also think it's a great idea to give the parents an actual link to the survey questions, which are also available online so that they can see what their kid would be reading. Okay, and then why doesn't it require parental consent? It's because in order for it to require parental consent, it has to both touch on one of the protected topics and be asking the question in relation to the student or the student's family members. So some of the questions in the school climate survey for the K through 12 one, I don't think any in the younger grades would fall into the protected topic, but the K through 12 survey does have some that touch on protected topics. But of those ones, they're not asking about it in relation to the student or family member. In other cases, you have questions that are asking about the student or family member, but the questions are not on the protected topics. Okay. All right, and then very quickly, we have 1 minute left. I just want to mention that while we talked about this primarily in relation to surveys, which I would argue is probably the main situation where you'll find yourself applying this law, this also can come up in just like regular curricular activities. So this is an assignment that a parent made us aware of, that they had concern about this assignment, and they marked some of these things. They said, this is problematic according to Utah PPRA. That's not what they called it, but and they marked some of these categories. And indeed, this assignment does ask about the wealth of the student, their religion, their political views. Interestingly, the parent identified ethnicity as being problematic, which is not identified as a protected topic in this law, but these other three are. So the guidance we would give to you is that even though this isn't an actual survey, it is an assignment that's asking information from students about their income, political views, and religion, and it's asking them about the student. It's not just talking about it in broader terms. So I would say, like, while it's not like cut and dry, I would say you should either get parental consent, or probably the better option is just to not give this assignment or make a modified version that excludes those questions. All that is to say that this law is not exclusively limited to surveys. Like whenever you're asking information from students, you should be cognizant of this law. Okay, you can come back and look at some of these later if you'd like. Oh, gender identity. I will mention this really quickly because I promised I would. The Attorney General's office has said, like I said, they have not weighed in on whether or not gender identity falls into the category of sexual behavior, orientation, or attitudes. So they've kind of like abstained from giving their opinion on that. However, they have come out and said specifically that teachers or schools should not give surveys that ask students their preferred pronouns. Which I know has been a common practice, maybe not common, but I've heard of some schools where this has happened, where the teachers are trying to better understand how to best take care of their students. And so they might ask the preferred pronouns of the student in a survey at the beginning of the year. The Attorney General's office has said that is not allowed to happen. So this is something that you might need to communicate to the other folks in your LEA to make them aware of this. And that actually brings me to the last nuance. Here's information about parent consent that you can come back to and look at later if you'd like. But I wanted to just mention this, which is that there isn't anything that prohibits a student from spontaneously volunteering information. So if a student wanted to talk to a teacher about one of these protected topics, they could bring it up, but the teacher could not like initiate or like prompt further information from the student. And there's also a provision that allows for staff to talk to a student about potentially protected topics, particularly probably like mental or psychological problems, if they feel that the student is at risk of harming themselves or others. And then if that does happen, then they need to immediately contact the parents to let them know that that conversation happened. Oh, Caleb asks, is there a source or published document on that guidance from the Attorney General about asking for pronouns? I don't think there is. We have it in an email. So maybe I'll get from them. I'll talk with them about it, and because I imagine, Caleb, what you're getting at is that it would be helpful to have that documentation when you're discussing with your LEAs about that policy. So yeah, I'll talk to them about it and include it in our next newsletter. All right. If you have we're as always trying to develop our training materials. So if you have specific examples of situations where Utah PPRA or FERPA questions come up, we love to hear your questions, and we would like to use some scenarios to build like real life scenario training. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or if you have examples for us. And with that being said, John, do you want, or let's see, Melissa, do you want to tell us anything about the closing doc?
Sure. So right now I'm going to press enter in the chat. So I just shared the link to our closing doc. So our closing doc basically will include links to all the slide decks that you've seen today. It includes additional links to some of the same things that are already linked in the slide decks, but it's just easier to access. Includes some extra stuff at the bottom as well. And it also includes the link to our exit ticket survey. So I will also put that in the chat right now. So that's a really quick Qualtrics survey. We'd really appreciate it if you could just take a minute to go through that. And like I said, I'll put that in the chat in a second, and that's also in our closing document as well. But yeah, if you have any questions about that document or any of the links in it aren't working for you, or you realize something's up with that, just contact one of us on the team and we'll be happy to fix anything if anything's wrong or answer any questions. But that's all I have.
Thanks, Melissa. And thanks, you guys. This has been fun. It's always fun to see you. We're so grateful for the good work you do. And as always, I hope you always feel comfortable reaching out to our team. We'd love to help.